Wanna talk? So let's talk. Here. Talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk your
It's election night, November the 6th, 2012. The future of freedom, the future of the American way is on the line tonight, in my opinion. Joining us with my co-host is Greg W. Howard, and our guest, of course, is Dr. Alan Keyes. Dr. Keyes, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you, Stan?
Nervous as a pregnant black woman in the same city as an abortion clinic.
Why so nervous?
Well, I'm nervous because of what we've already heard and seen about the cheating. I'm nervous because, you know, at best we'll not do well, but at worst we'll be destroyed. I'm nervous. I'm nervous.
I actually don't believe that that's hanging in the balance between these parties. I think the American people have a fundamental decision they're going to have to take, but it's not taken in the choice between these guys. It's taken in the struggle that I think is still ongoing within the American people themselves as to whether they're going to sit back and act as if the self-governing constitutional republic we're supposed to have in this country isn't already on its deathbed. I think it is. Either way this election goes, the elitist faction these guys represent puts the American people in a position where they must rubber stamp the destruction of constitutional government by rubber stamping the destruction of the American character, the abandonment of the God-respecting values on which the country was founded, the imposition of an approach to government that both of them, in their practice, have emphasized in terms of a government that is about a couple of things: to pretend to take care of people and to provide them with jobs. I was thinking about this, Stan. In the Bible, what is the paradigm of the understanding of government that sees government as the jobs provider? What figure in political government figure in the Bible represents that, do you think?
I don't know.
Pharaoh.
Who?
Pharaoh.
Oh, the Pharaoh. Okay, yeah,
Egypt.
right. The head of the
If you look at what happens in Egypt, particularly in the Joseph account, the Pharaoh gradually turns the people of Egypt into his slaves. He provides them with jobs. He is one of the first examples of the big public works project employment with the pyramids and the tombs and all of this, right? And he's also, just by the way, somebody who represents the mentality that ultimately is involved, demanded by, and produced by such an approach to government, and that is people worshipped Pharaoh as God, right? And I think that's where we are. And you look at one side and the other. Oh, they're going to provide these jobs through government action in their supposedly different ways. But it doesn't appear to occur to them to question whether or not it is the government's business to be the general employer, that is to say, the general master of the people who are then slaves. It's a despotic idea of government. And though the despots are going to be some technocrat, some elitist, this is and that, the truth is that either way you go with these people, you have surrendered the understanding of decent, responsible self-government that the American Republic is supposed to be about. And I think people have to decide, is this what we're about now? Because if it is, then I think historians will look back at this period and Stan, they're not going to look at 2012 as the historic moment. The marker for this period in history is going to be the fall of the Twin Towers. And they're basically going to say, that's the cutoff point for the American Republic. After that, it was dead. And we think something big is going on right now, but if we If we decide to accept what's on offer here, then it's already over. And I think that the American people need to wake up and realize this and stop putting their heads in this silly con game that is actually intended to distract them from what is really happening to their liberty and to their country.
All right, let me get Greg in here. Greg, your thoughts?
Well, I've always said that until we get the idea that we are the power, that we will never be truly free. One of the things that I've always asked, and I agree with Alan completely on this, is that why do we look to government to provide our jobs or to make the conditions for us to have jobs? The problem is the government is in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this very, very well because I'm a small businessman, or I'm trying to be. I'm beating my head against the wall. I'm in one of the most regulated industries in the country. And what we have developed in this country is an American form of fascism. The means of production are nominally privately held, but they are under almost complete and total control by the government. They are not owned by the government, but there is not a thing that any industry can do in this country anymore other than some under-the-table, black market industries that is free of government interference in any way, shape, manner, or form. Now, sometimes you hear a candidate speaking about they're going to get the government out of the way, but oftentimes what they do is they create another layer of government to get in the way. So the problem has been that there has been no real way for the American businessman to see any clarity to want to invest and grow his business, or in my case, no matter how much I would like to invest and grow my business, I spend 20 to 30 hours a week just complying with laws instead of growing my business.
By the way, an interesting note here, just to interrupt here, in the popular vote, Romney is ahead, 3,981,000 to Obama's 3,714,000, but as to electoral votes, right now Barack Obama's ahead 79 to 71. Go ahead, Dr. Keys.
No, I was just going to say, in agreement with that, I sadly think that in terms of what we're dealing with economically, we have allowed what I call the elitist faction to set us up through the Federal Reserve, through the manipulation of the income tax, through these regulatory schemes supposedly intended to protect people from each other and themselves, right? We have allowed them to set up a system where one guy, this would be Obama, is going to sit on your chest and strangle you hard, right? And you say, stop, stop, stop. And then the other guy comes along and he's going to sit on your chest and he's going to lift up the strangulation a little bit. And you say, oh, that feels so much better. But he's still sitting on your chest, strangling you to death. You see? And this is supposed to be a choice. Stan, this is not a choice.
By the way, we have seen in Ohio particularly, gas prices get amazingly reasonable, all the way down into the $2.99, $2.89 area. Today, after the polls closed, gas shot up like 4%. It shot up like 30, 40 cents. Wonder why?
Yes, I wonder why. See, I think that's the kind of power shouldn't be in anybody's hands. And that's what I think the founders of this country thought. They didn't think the way all these people still talk now, Stan. Give me this power and I'll use it well. The power of government strikes me as sort of like the ring of power in Lord of the Rings. The only people we should trust are the people who look at it and say, even though I think I'm the smartest, best guy in the world, I can't use this power without abusing it. Therefore, we shouldn't leave it lying around. And who is saying that? Nobody. They're all scrambling after this ring of power that we have created in a national government that is way, way out of control. It's a monster like a Frankenstein that we've created. And these people fight over who's going to be the master of this Frankenstein. And the people really ought to be trying to think, whoa, how do we dismantle this Frankenstein?
And I think we've seen some discussion in that area, some thoughts, not enough, but the idea of the fair tax is a good start, eliminating government's power over people and distributing that to the states who would collect the consumption tax So you
Stan,
at least have
I
seen
will,
some discussion.
I will make a little. I'm not a betting man, so this is obviously a kind of symbolic wager. But I would, make a wager with you that during the course, if Mitt Romney is elected, during the course of the Romney era, you will hear no more talk of two things: the fair tax and the restructuring or abolition of the Federal Reserve. You won't hear about this. That'll be off the table. I mark my words. See, because I think that, sad to say, there are people who know that this is the way we need to go. Starting in the early 20th century, several things were put in place intended to destroy the republic and consolidate power in the hands of an elite. An elite that was going to be claiming it on the basis of scientific power, technological know-how, superior economic wisdom, money, whatever, but still an elite. And those things are not going to be taken off the table until the people wake up and make that the agenda.
Well, again,
Not promises to take care of us, not promises to create jobs, promises to dismantle the structure of oligarchy that has been gradually put in place to destroy the constitutional republic.
I would totally agree. Now let's take a couple other points here. There was a million Muppet March scheduled for Washington, D.C. This was to be the outrage over the comment that we would stop funding public television and radio. They promised 1 million people would march to D.C. Well, they were 999,400 short. 600 people showed up. I've often said if you had 500,000 or 1 million pro-lifers descend on Washington, D.C., they would say no one showed. And if you had 12 homosexuals with a stuffed giraffe, it would make the lead story on every one of the news networks. I think this is similar. Instead of saying, what a joke, 600 people when you said 1 million, instead they're saying, look how many people showed up. 600 people took their time. Your thoughts?
What thoughts are needed, Stan? I think that's the sort of thing that, as you say, it does confirm what we know to be the underlying bias and manipulation that is commonplace in this media monster, whatever we want to call it. But I think we're going to have arrived at a place where we need to be when en masse and collectively, particularly people who fancy themselves to be conservatives and so forth and so on, will have taken advantage of a lot of the instruments of self-information and association that are out there, so that we won't even have to think about these people anymore. I really think, and I've said it many times over the years, that the best thing we can do with this propaganda, elitist faction media is ignore it, because if we do, it will go away. See? That is one of those things. It's like they said, that joke about your teeth, ignore them and they'll go away. Ignore this media, meaning don't focus on it, don't watch it, don't bother with it. I can't name a single one of the personalities in the broadcast media that people think are so important, because I don't know who they are and I don't care anymore.
Well, I'm with you there.
They don't convey truth. They don't convey reality. When are we going to stop bothering about them?
All right, let's get Greg in this conversation. Greg.
Well, the question is no doubt that the problem is the media and the garbage that it feeds the American people all the time. I, too, saw the reports about the Million Muppet March, and, of course, the guy who plays Big Bird is paid $317,000 a year, so he's a one-percenter that these guys are trying to save. Of course, we have to forget that the Sesame Street show only gets about 6% of its funding from the federal government. The rest is provided by private funding and grants, etc. So it was, of course, always a tempest in a teapot. The problem is the media itself, and Alan's absolutely right. The issue is we have to find some way to get rid of them. I've thought of different ways. I tried Operation Slam, and, of course, organizing conservatives to do anything is like herding cats. Absolutely useless activity, trying to get any group of conservatives to do anything other than, once every 2 years come out and vote. I can't see anything in getting anything done there. I've thought about going after sponsors. I did finally find one plan that seems to be working, and it's working very well in several markets right now. and that is to put shame on the local affiliates of the major networks, and that is done by protesting at the local affiliates' offices, as well as the car dealers who tend to advertise during the local news. And you know what? They're strangely susceptible to these kind of protests, and that's working.
Well, that's a good step in the right direction. We were looking for the video. Did you ever find the video of the SEALs? We're looking for the video of the SEALs who confronted the new Black Panther Party members that were at the same polling booths doing the same kind of intimidation, maybe not threatening to kill babies, but then a group of SEALs approached them, and you know what? They, like the Arabs, found that they have more gears in reverse than they do forward, like all of them. I just wish I could have seen that.
I retweeted it. It may be in my timeline on Twitter. Unfortunately, I can't multitask all that well to do that and still be on your show. So
all right, during the break,
wish I'd known, or I would have sent it to you.
Yeah, during the break, you can just send it to Rich, and then we can maybe play it for everyone. All right, Dr. Keys, there are many financial realities that we're dealing. One, of course, is the whole thing that comes the first of the year if there's no decision made to do otherwise. It would destroy our military and, frankly, dramatically cut back on the size of government. Not that I'm against the size of government, but I certainly am not for that much of a dismemberment of our military. We have the elimination of the quote-unquote vacation from Social Security payments. We have the elimination of the so-called Bush tax cuts. We have the reality that not only will there be dramatically more unemployed, but the people who are employed are going to bring home dramatically less money, right or wrong.
Well, Stan, I think no matter how you cut it, and I have said this for several years, we are faced with the reality that we're going to go as a people through a period of economic hardship. There hasn't been any way to avoid this because we let these people play these little Ponzi scheme games with our government budget, with all this spending that actually fill the pockets of their cronies and didn't help anybody, and so forth and so on. And at some point, the chickens come home to roost. It all comes together in a kind of witching hour, and the trains crack up. Here's the question, though, Stan. If we have to go through this hardship, then what do we want to be as a nation on the other side of it? Do we want to be a people who have given in to the terrorizing tactics of the people who set this situation up and will put us through the ringer so that at the other side of it they're in absolute control of our nation's destiny? Or will we bite the bullet, take the bit in our own teeth, and say, since we have to go through this hardship, let's go through it in order to dismantle the instruments that allowed these economic terrorists to put us in this bind in the first place? If we're going to suffer, let's suffer for the sake of our liberty and restoring it, rather than suffering in order to fully consolidate. And by fully consolidating their control, realize the purpose for which this whole culmination of events has been orchestrated: to overthrow the constitutional republic and replace it with an elitist faction. Call it what you will. I don't know, technocratic elitism, ideological elitism if you're a leftist and so forth. The key thing is to see that, and I've taken to calling them this, I hate this word progressives. I don't know why anybody applies it to these people. I'm sick of using language in a way that's inherently deceitful. These people are not progressing. We are going back to the period before America was founded, when the standard way of government was by the few, over the many, for the sake of the few. That's where they're taking us. That's regression. They are regressives. Do we want to follow these regressives? Romney, Obama, I don't care what they call themselves. Republican, Democrat. The reality is they're going to produce a world that reproduces what was essentially the enslavement of most of mankind in various forms throughout the world, throughout history. And people found their liberty, Stan, not when they came up with some economic panacea. but when they took hold of their own characters and became sufficiently independent in spirit and will, and sufficiently willing to discipline themselves to maintain the family units that were the institutional basis for their independence, that they were then able to throw off this yoke. Because this kind of terrorism, you work for us or you'll be destroyed. It was the heart of feudalism. It has been the heart of every form of oligarchy since time immemorial, as illustrated in the Pharaoh story in the Bible. And the way people finally escaped it wasn't because they put their faith in some lying politician. It was because they put their faith in the God who created us, but who, according to the understanding that this country was founded on, is a God that requires a standard of justice and self-discipline that is within the reach of everyone who is willing to accept it. Not just a few wonderful families who can then, noblesse oblige, provide everybody with what they need. That's a lie. But do we want to restore that sense of the self-sufficiency of the people in their spirit, which then precedes their economic self-sufficiency? Is there any way to do it without the great frontier and the other challenges that really forged the American character in such a way that it became kind of the second nature of Americans, to know that they had to rely on themselves and each other rather than on government? I don't know, Stan, but I think that has to be the goal.
I couldn't agree more. Greg?
Well, there's not a lot that you can add to that, except that I think that at some point the American people have got to come back in touch with their own heritage. And the problem is that we have been robbed of our heritage by our educational system. We have been deceived, as Alan talks about, by a misuse of our language, but we have also been robbed by a misuse of our own history, a rewriting of our own history, to the point where the average American does not even know how we became a nation and why we became a nation. They hear a little bit about a Tea Party in Boston and some folks. They don't even know about the Boston Massacre. They don't even know about how many times we petitioned the Crown for the redress of our grievances. They don't know that it was a 10, 15-year-long process of asking the Crown, listen to us, please, before we finally rose up reluctantly, and that it was not originally widespread support for the revolt against England, and that they don't understand the hardships that we went through to become a nation where troops went for months without being paid, and that many times we lost more battles than we won, but we won the strategic ones to become what we are. But the American people don't know their own history. They don't know what it took to become a nation. They don't know that it took another 13 years to form a constitution from the day we formed the Declaration of Independence. They think in terms of some sort of instant fast food mentality that everything magically appears in ready form, ready to go. And therefore, they don't understand what it takes to keep and maintain something so precious. And so as a result, we've completely become lost as a nation. We don't know what a nation that does not know its history will not have a future. And that's where we are today.
Dr. Keyes?
No, I think that's very true. And I think that it's purposeful also. In other words, this loss of contact with that American heritage didn't just happen. It was made to happen. It has been on the agenda with which our education system has been revamped for over a century. And the sad truth is that it begins, by the way, with cutting people off from the spiritual root of that heritage. A spiritual root, of course, that begins with the founders in their acknowledgement that justice and the main business of politics is ultimately taking place in an environment superintended by the Creator God, and that requires acknowledgement of and respect for the will and authority of God. You say that today, and it's supposed to be somehow religious and unusual. No. These days, and I was thinking about this because I'm going to try to write something a little bit more comprehensive about it, but this whole business of substituting jobs and jobs and jobs. What's the aim of government? The aim of government is to create jobs and facilitate jobs and all of this sort of stuff. Put people to work. Now, it used to be a time, by the way, when if somebody said they were going to put you to work, that basically was not a good thing. Now, people didn't mind working for themselves, but when somebody was putting you to work, that basically meant that they were enslaving you. And so we're sitting back here and saying, enslave us, please. Because without the slavery, we can't eat, we can't take care of our families, we can't have our video games, etc. We don't realize what a far cry that is from a society that begins with the understanding that the aim of politics is not any material condition whatsoever. Gosh, Alan, what can that mean? It means that you make the assumption that people as individuals, in their the natural association of the family, in the larger associations in which through their mutual interest they forge bonds with one another, that people through those activities can in fact devise the means to take care of the basic necessities. That then you have to worry about the fact that, oh, I worked hard to keep this and to get it and to build it. And here come along these thugs who have no decency, never hit a lick at a snake, and just managed to develop proficiency in the use of the sword or the gun, and they're going to take it all away. And government grew out of the need for the people who were not vicious thugs to get together, pool their strength to deal with the people who were the vicious thugs. And the aim was what, Stan? To maintain justice, to make sure that what people were out there doing through those voluntary associations, through those associations that respected the good conscience that said, I'm going to marry and take care of the kids and raise the family, and we're going to do what's necessary. We're going to work with other people so that we can survive in the depredations of this wilderness or wherever we are. Those people were going to establish an institution that would allow them to protect themselves against the unjust. So it wasn't about jobs because you took care of that yourself. It wasn't about taking care of your kids because you took care of them yourself. It wasn't about any of these things they now pretend government is about. And the one thing they don't do anymore, which is protect us from the thugs who are trying to take away everything we work for, that is what government's all about. And now what's funny is you have all these folks, and this is Republicans, Democrats. The Democrats do it on an ideological basis. Because I'm some big-hearted guy who has subscribed to Marxism and believe in the proletariat and all, I'm going to take care of everybody. Lies, lies, lies. Or the commercials I hear from the Republicans. I've been a successful businessman, therefore I can take care of the public good. No, you can't. I need to know whether or not you are seriously dedicated to the public good and the public interest. Because 9 times out of 10, Stan, and this has been true if we didn't keep our eyes open throughout the history of our country, business people outside of government, when they get into government, work for the same goal they had when they were outside of government, which is to profit themselves and their cronies. And that's not the purpose of government. So how do we prevent that? We prevent it by remembering what is the purpose, justice, and by understanding that the character that's needed to care about that justice and to make sure that it's going to be taken care of and respected for all people is not something that just happens. It's something that requires attention and development, and we have to care for that the same way we care for our material lives. And I don't think people believe that anymore. Otherwise, they wouldn't listen to these jokers when they come along and say, well, this moral stuff, that has nothing to do with politics. Don't we realize that the whole basis of politics is a moral understanding about what's just and what's unjust, and that the character that results from taking that seriously then leads to the discipline that gives each and every person willing to accept it the courage to stand for their rights because they feel that they are in the right. They act with good conscience. We've thrown it all away. The founders repeatedly emphasized these connections. You know that, Stan. Repeatedly, because they really cared about self-government. They knew, let people forget these connections between the character, between the caring about right, the caring about justice, the respect for God and their prosperity, and everything will fail. Well, we have forgotten them. We've been induced by these self-serving elitists to forget these things. And then people like me come along, and some folks will applaud, and other folks will say, get out of here with that moral stuff. You're always talking about that. And yeah, the founders of this country continually emphasized that this was the first requirement of liberty and self-government, that you maintain the character based upon the faith of the people.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll be back with Dr. Alan Keyes, Greg Howard, and me right here on Talk to Solomon. You have a computer, if you're alive today, which means you have a hard drive, which means it's going to break down. Mosey, the backup people, for thousands, for Stan, for thousands of people, for tens of thousands of people, is simply common sense. You go to cpnlive.com, click on the icon for Mosey, the backup people, and sign up. It's just a few dollars a month. Let me tell you something. We had a break-in. They stole our whole computer. You know what? When they take the computer, you can't recover anything, but we had Mosey. We had the backup. We were able to restore everything simply by buying another computer. cpnlive.com, click on the icon for Mosey, the backup people, and give yourself common sense, peace of mind, great value, the best thing you've ever done. Sooner or later, it's going to be Mosey, the backup people. I like to eat. Do you like to eat? We all do. And usually we run to the grocery store, we run to the convenience store, or we have something in the fridge. But power's been out in parts of this country in the last few weeks. We don't know what's going to come down the pike economically. Smart people are putting in food. Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves is a line of foods that you can put away that will last for a very long time. You know, they say eat what you store and store what you eat. This is great tasting stuff, healthy for you, a full line. You go to our website, cpnlive.com, and click on the button for Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves and see all the different things we have. This is good tasting food. It's reasonably priced. It will last. And it's worth its weight in gold if a problem arises. I know you don't think there's going to be anything that goes wrong. Actually, you do. This is smart. This is smart insurance. This is smart preparation. This is smart thinking. You have kids, you have a spouse, you have parents, you have dependents, you have an appetite. All those things can be addressed by a frugal but smart investment in Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves. Try them out. You will be tickled to death with the taste of them. You know what? In many cases, people start to eat this and they think, heck, this tastes better and costs less than what you're going to the grocery store to buy. cpnlive.com, check it out. Hey, my name is Stan Solomon, and you know if I have something to say, I'll say it. And I'll only tell you the truth because I'm a Republican, not a Democrat. Democrats always lie. Republicans only lie half the time. I don't lie at all. This is the Fuel Mule. It's an extraordinary product that was developed by a friend of mine, an engineer, and it increases the fuel mileage on your vehicle. If you have a combustion engine, this will increase your mileage by 10 to 20%. It bolts around your fuel line. You can install it yourself or have your mechanic do it. It is an extraordinary item and it flat works. I've been using it for more than 10 years. It's increased my mileage on every vehicle I put it on, and by the way, it will last forever. You can get rid of your vehicle, just take it off and put on the next one. Go to cpnlive.com. You'll have more information there. You can order it right there. We absolutely guarantee you'll be satisfied. The Fuel Mule. It's a way to kick down your cost of fuel and kick up your mileage. Don't you love the name? I thought of it. The Fuel Mule.